Welcome back to Krondor. Indeed, it's the 30th anniversary of Betrayal at Krondor, and we're going to welcome you to our live panel. I'm David S. Dawson, host of the Intellectual Podcast, and it's my absolute pleasure to host this anniversary special for all the fans of the game. Betrayal at Krondor was a computer role-playing game created by Dynamics, published by Sierra Online, and was based on the novels of Raymond E. Feist and the world of Midkemia, created by Midkemia Press. It was critically well received, won several awards, and broke new ground in several categories. All of our panelists today were in some way connected either with designing, producing, or promoting Betrayal at Krondor's initial release. So now I would like you to welcome our panelists to the stream. Here we go. Hello, everybody. So we're going to take a second and go through each of you. If you could give us a little introduction to who you are and what your role was in making the game or promoting the game. Neil, why don't we start with you, since you're the person I know the best on the panel, and we can roll that way to begin with. Don't forget to unmute yourself, sir.
Sorry, I mean, he's just like, you think after all these years of the pandemic, I'd be ready for the, unmute your mic before you talk. Hi, folks. I am Neil Halford, and I was the lead narrative designer. I was also kind of a co-designer along with John, but that was the piece of the products I worked on.
Excellent. And let's bring up Timothy next.
Hello, Timothy Strelchin. I was a programmer, handled a lot of the 3D world management and traversal navigation, things you saw on the first person screen, that kind of stuff, a variety of other screens in the game and whatnot.
Excellent. And Cher.
Hi everyone. I found talent from everywhere in Eugene, and I designed the costumes based on the art drawings for the characters, and built the costumes. They were meant to be this little big pictures. So I mean, half of us were characters in the game, and all of my theatrical friends in Eugene were also in it.
Awesome.
It was a big cast and a lot of fun, and a lot of really cool props made by Doug Mackey. So,
fantastic. And we'll get more into that as the panel continues. Let's bring up next panelist, Mark.
Hey, Mark Verrier. I was the lead artist, working with the rest of the team and the art director to make all the visuals for the game.
Fantastic. And next up, we've got Vance.
Hey, I'm Vance Nagel. I was one of the 3D artists that worked on creating the world and textures and just building all the tiles. There were so many tiles, but yeah.
And Bob.
I'm Bob Lindstrom. I was kind of the annoying executive in charge who came in and made irrelevant comments at inconvenient times. My main contribution was to assign one of the greatest producer designers of all time to this project, John Cutter.
Excellent. And speaking of John, here's John.
Bob, that was very kind, but uncalled for, undeserved. First of all, I just want to say it's great to see all these people. I haven't seen a lot of them in 30 years. So that's been really, really awesome and really fun today. I was the original designer on the game. Like all great creative team products, though, it was a team effort. I mean, everyone contributed to the design of the game, and I was also the producer as well.
Awesome. And our final panelist, Steve. You're still muted, Steve.
Hey, I'm Steve Corden. I was another programmer on this project. I was in charge of quests, inventory, dialogue, kind of the story side of things.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys for joining the panel today. I know this game has its place in history. And at 30 years, I'm sure a lot has happened. But what everybody wants to know is kind of how this game came to be. I mean, obviously, it came out at a time when we didn't have social media and we didn't have so much access to the backside of creation of content that all of us enjoy. So let's dive in with some of these questions that we've got here. John, you were the first person assigned on the project. Can you share with us how it got rolling in the first place?
Yeah, it's I think kind of an entertaining story, and if you'll indulge me for a couple of minutes, I'll tell it.
Indulge John.
Neil and I were working at New World Computing in Southern California on Might and Magic and other games there. I was running product development. I was the head of product development, but I'm a creative and a game designer first and foremost, so I wasn't really enjoying that. And then Jeff Tennell, who was co-founder of Dynamics, approached me at one of the trade shows and said, "John, I'm looking for somebody to come in and just make a fun game. That would be your entire job, is just making the game fun." And I said, "How much do I have to pay you for this job?" And he said, "Nothing. We'll pay you." And so I took the job, and I was in Jeff's office shortly after we got to Eugene, and he said, "John, what kind of game do you want to make?" And I said, "Well, what kind of game do you want me to make?" And he said, No, you don't understand. You can do anything. What kind of game do you really, really want to make?" And I said, "Well, what kind of game do you really, really want me to make?" And we went back and forth a little bit, and he goes, "Just come up with something." So Dynamics was working on some adventure games at the time, and I came up with a concept for an adventure game about a tabloid news reporter. And I just thought that could be incredibly funny. We could have, news stories about miniature schnauzers stealing military jets and invading Afghanistan, or whatever we wanted to do. It could be a blast. And I took the proposal that I wrote and I put it on Jeff's desk. And I was heading back to my office, and a friend of mine, I think it was Pat Cook, said, "What are you working on?" And I told him, and he said, "Wow, that sounds exactly like Zach McCracken in the Alien Mindbenders." What? I had no idea. I probably had played it or heard about it. I hadn't played it. I had probably heard about it. And I thought, oh my God, I've got to get this proposal off of Jeff's desk. And I ran back up to his office. He wasn't there. I'm rifling through the papers on his desk trying to find this proposal. And I had just reached into his drawer, and I thought, this is going to look really bad if Jeff walks in. And I look up, and sure enough, he is standing in the doorway watching me rifle through all the papers on his desk. And he kind of held this document up. He goes, "Are you looking for this?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "This is an off." And I said, I know. And I grabbed it. And he goes, "No, come back. I've been reading this fantasy series called The Rift War Saga by Raymond Feist. It's really good. You should read it." And I had not read a lot of fantasy at that point, but I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. And I just almost instantly fell in love with it. And I thought, not only do I want to make a role-playing game out of this world and these characters, I want it to feel like a book. And I thought, I need a really, really good designer and writer. And so I reached out to Neil and brought him on board. And actually, I tried to hire Ray first, not realizing that Ray was a successful fantasy author. I figured he was just some guy working at a gas station that was writing fantasy on the weekends. He had just turned down a deal for like $250,000 for his next book. And I thought, okay, yeah, he's way out of our league, but he did want to work with us. And I found Neil, and the game kind of took off from there.
Okay. Yeah. Well, actually, that brings me into my next question, which is for Neil. So Neil, as the lead game narrative designer, you had to step into some pretty big shoes for the project. How familiar were you with Feist's work before this, and how did that collaboration work?
Well, the first thing I had to do is give it my job at the gas station. But no, it was fantastic. Again, first I was, whenever John had left to go to Dynamics for New World, I was super sad because we'd worked together on a game called Planet's Edge. But I kept on saying to John and say, well, if anything opens up at Dynamics, call me. So it was about 6 months after he left that I got that call. But it was just kind of funny to me because so going into it, I had not read Feist's work. Well, actually, there's kind of little asterisk that's behind it. That whenever I was 13 years old, 14 years old, I actually picked up a copy of Magician, and I started reading the book. And so I discovered that the main character's name was Pug, and I was so mortally offended by the name of my main character being Pug that I threw the book across the room and I didn't pick it up again. Now, so then lo and behold, here comes John, and he brings me this stuff, and so okay, here's this series of books. I haven't read them. I've heard the name of Feist because obviously he was a best-selling fantasy author, and so I'd seen him on the shelves and everything, but I just had totally forgotten any connection to that book I read as a kid. And so John says, here's this series of books, what would you think about adapting them? So I said, okay. Well, I ran out and I got the entire all the Feist available book at the time, and was reading through the first one, and I get through and I start reading the first chapter and go, wait a minute, I started this book when I was 13. Anyway, so I did get through reading not just that book, but at that point I think there were all of the 3 books that were kind of the setups. There was a Magician and Silverthorn and Darkness at Asethanon, and then at that point we also had Prince of the Blood had been released. And in addition to that, there were the 3 books that he co-wrote with Jenny Wirtz about the Empire series, which I was reading. Actually, there was 2 of the Empire books that were available. The 3rd one dropped while we were in production. But anyway, so I read through all of those, and of course, as John was I think had mentioned before, is that the original proposal was we were going to take Silverthorn, which was the 2nd book, and turn it into a computer game. And when I was talking to John about it, I said, personally, as a player, and I don't really like the idea of just straight up adapting one of the books, because personally, as a player, I already know how it ends. I know who the bad guy is. I know where the things are going, or where the sort of the important narrative turns are going to be, and it's not very satisfying to me to basically just replicate what's going on in the books. We could go in and have it end a different way, but if I'm familiar with Silverthorn, that feels unsatisfying. That okay, you changed the ending of the book. So I said, let's do something really radical. We'll throw this at Ray and see what he thinks about it. But I said, so between A Darkness at Sethanon and The Prince of the Blood, there was a 20-year narrative gap. And I said, what if we hop back, right halfway between Darkness at Sethanon and Prince of the Blood, and we'll set a new something new right there, and it'll be a totally new adventure that will take place, and we're going to try to figure out which characters we want to bring back. And so one of the things that I had been there's a little bit of spoiler about a character that is in Prince of the Blood. I hope I'm not spoiling this too much for folks, but the character of Locklear gets killed, and I said I really hated the way that Feist killed Locklear in that book. It was, and so one of my things on the list was said, let's go back and give Locklear another chance to kind of do something big and fun and heroic. So I kind of came up with my ideal list of characters, and then so after I got to Eugene, and the first week that I was there, John and I basically locked ourselves in his office, and we spent the whole day hashing out what the main plot line was going to be. And so all of the important beats, what the different chapters were going to be, and slap that together. And then we threw it, in the mail and sent it to Ray to see how he was going to respond to it. And so we got the word back from Ray, and Ray actually seemed, I don't think he had any major notes or changes based on that original proposal. I mean, there were some kind of small fiddling shoe button kinds of things that he wanted to change, but no really big changes to what we'd proposed. And so from that point, we just sent it up to I guess before it went to Feist, we kind of sent it up the chain to Jeff Tennell and the Sierra, and they the first one to kind of say, okay, we're good with this. But
I remember
I think that kind of answers one of our. I think that answers one of our questions in the chat. They were asking how much was Feist actually involved in the production.
Yeah. So yeah, the kind of the answer to that is that. Well, actually, John was starting to say something. So John,
I was just gonna say that I, at the last minute to that document we sent to Ray, I had added a little poem, and I don't remember what the poem said, but I know it ended something about darkness cometh, and Ray dragged me over the cold. Cometh, darkness cometh. He just would not let that go, and I said, "Oh, look, Neil didn't write that. That was for me. I'm sorry. I'll stay out of it."
So the thing about involvement with Ray is Ray was not someone who minced words. He was not going to say nice things to make us feel good or whatever. He wasn't overly mean either, but he had very strong opinions about things. So whenever he did have something to say, he said it in a very, very kind of strong kind of words about things. But no, for the most part, I would say for the vast majority of production, we were kind of on autopilot, which kind of surprised me. But the big thing that he had at the moment was that he was in the process of writing King's Buccaneer, and he was really busy with writing that. And so every once in a while, we would send him some notes or here's kind of a progress update of what we're doing. But for the most part, he left us alone. Other than, like I say, occasionally he'd see something that just kind of jumped out of him and say, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever seen." But he would. So he'd occasionally have some things that he wanted me to change, but for the most part, he let us kind of, he kind of trusted John and I to do what he said he wanted to do, and so that was kind of surprising. But so Feist's involvement once we got rolling was fairly minimal, and we every couple of months, we might get an email back and forth or have a question to him about lore or something, but for the most part, he kind of let us do what he wanted us to do.
That's good. Okay, so the next question I've got here, it's not really a question. So Tim has resurrected video from the original technical proof of concept demo, and I'm going to show that right now. So Tim or anybody else in the panel who would like to chime in while we play it, can you share with the audience a little bit about the race to be one of the first 3D RPGs?
Sure. Yeah, so this was the first insight or view of what I was going to work on when I started working on this. This was a concept demo from November of 1991, and a marriage of our three-space Dynamics' three-space flight sim engine, and then the idea was to combine the 2D GDS type adventure style graphics with it. But this is our first view of what we were going to turn into a game and what it might look like. 320, 200 pixels, 256 color palette. I tried my best. I actually found this demo stashed in an attic in a box with my copy of the floppy disk version, and resurrected it.
Oh my gosh!
Got it running in DOSBox several months ago.
That's amazing.
Nice.
Now, this is the same engine that was used for Dynamics' flight simulator games, right? How much did you guys have to change it?
I think so. So we weren't the tech. Some of us on the team, Steve and a few others, did some improvements to their Dynamics had a set of libraries of functionality for the 3D engine and doing 2D bitmap graphics rendering and that kind of stuff. And some improvements were made to the 3D engine. So there were several updates to it. There was improved texture mapping was done. I think Steve was probably involved in doing that. Maybe you want to talk about that some. I think Steve, you added this grass texturing, a different approach. You might notice if you see the video here closely, it's dancing, and it looks like it's boiling the ground. Steve, you want to talk about how you fixed that up?
I think that actually started a little bit before I was there with Lucazooks, who are two of the pictures on the bottom. Some of the famous programmers at Dynamics, and Yeah, some of that was done right from the start. This is the first time I ever saw the product as well with that boiling grass. My only recollection of this is they said this is kind of cool. This is amazing for the time, everyone thought, but they warned me like we are all out of memory. There's no gameplay. We're walking around, but we've used this is somehow we have to make a whole game with characters and so we were always fighting the memory, being out of memory before we kind of even started.
Yep. Yeah, things like we had to do various things to use smoke and mirrors. Watch out behind the tree to the right here. We're going to turn around and look at something that we want to avoid. Anyway, we had to do lots of smoke and mirrors to hide the limitations, like making sure we don't walk through mountains like you're going to see us walk out of in just a second. All these guardrails weren't in this little prototype demo.
There we go.
Color cycling. Here's the mountain you see me walking out of. I walked through so there was no guardrails in this little demo. It was controlled. You see the camera going back and forth because it's like a flight sim control joystick type thing where I'm trying to navigate through it, and it doesn't know to stop when I let go. But it was a fun find.
One of the coolest thing about this was this was completed just around the time that I was coming in at Dynamics, because I started the first day of November, and Tim was kind of pointing out that this looked like it came out in November of 91, and so that would have been as I was coming aboard. And so I just remembered, of course, I've just come off of working on the Might and Magic games at New World Computing, and so that was all tile-based stuff, and so this was just leaps and bounds beyond what we had done at New World. And so it's just jaw-dropping, and particularly once we're outside and we're actually kind of naturally able to, because the dungeons, that's kind of a different kind of experience, but when you're outside and I can turn in any direction and look around, and that was just, at the time, I just remember this is the most stunning, amazing thing I've ever seen in my life.
Now, if I recall, when prior to shipping sometime in spring of 93, this title came out, Ultima Underworld. It had underground, three-dimensional underground exploration and other stuff, and I think perhaps somebody can correct me if they're wrong, John, but we quickly made sure that we had underground areas to explore.
The sewers.
I still will never forget that morning whenever that came down, because we were all sitting in our little common office, the second area that we occupied at the atrium whenever John got his corner office. And we were in there, and Nels, of course, Nels was our lead programmer. And Nels was in his office playing Ultima Underworlds, and after a little bit, he came out of his office and into the kind of the common area. We had said, "Guys, you need to come in here and look at this." And so we all kind of shuffled over into his office, and we're watching, and we're all just kind of shaking our heads and go, "Oh man," or whatever. And so Tim McClure, who was our other kind of junior designer, Tim never minced his words, and he was just going, "Fuck."
It's unfortunate. That's the second time that's happened in my career, because before Dynamics, I was working at Cinemaware making interactive movies, and I remember my boss calling me into the QA area, and someone had fired up Wing Commander, and it was devastating to all of us. I mean, this was a true interactive movie. What we were doing was nothing compared to what they had done. So yeah, this was my second time experiencing something like that.
One thing about that demo, Tim, there was actually a proof of concept demo that was far more primitive than what you just showed, that Peter and Derek Lukaszuk had put together. And one of the most memorable moments of my life actually was going, I think it was into Peter's office. Derek sadly is no longer with us, and seeing what 30 years later looks very primitive. But I looked at it, and there was one little point when they turned and there was the waterfall, again much more primitive than what you had prepared, Tim. And I thought, this is incredible. Someday this stuff is going to look so good that a great big part of a game is just going to be going around looking at stuff. And of course, that's happened,
Right.
But it was a mind blowing moment.
Yeah,
But then it took Neil and the rest of the team to actually turn it into something that was magnificent.
and actually, I think this was it, though. This is before my time. I didn't develop that.
I remember
This is
seeing
for-
something
yeah.
that didn't
Okay,
have the color
okay.
cycling that looked as good
Oh,
as what you had there, Tim. I mean, this
Well-
was probably like something that Peter had put together in a week.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other person in the photo, I think that's Peter Lewis in the middle, perhaps.
Yeah,
I'm
it is.
gonna post that up on the board for on
Peter
the
Lewis
page
and
for everybody.
I
Peter-
think it might be me on
Peter
the left.
Lukaszuk. Which one?
Peter Lewis, maybe.
Peter Lewis
Yeah,
is in the
Peter
middle
Lewis
there.
and Peter Lukaszuk, but I can't see
Is
well
Derek
enough
the other
to
one?
see the one on the. Is Derek the other? Oh no, it is
Hey,
Derek.
Peter.
Yeah.
It is Derek. Is it Peter the other one?
Yeah,
Hi,
I think so.
Peter.
Oh, so it's both of them.
By the way, hearing Bob talk reminded me, and seeing the portraits down at the bottom of that demo. Bob, I don't know if you remember this, but Bob is the one. He called me into the office one day after the game had been in development for a while, and he said, "You're making a fantasy game about magic, and your UI doesn't feel very magical." And I thought about it, and I realized he was absolutely right, and that's why we redesigned the UI to have the little globes with the portraits and the morphing symbols for the magic casting, and that all came when Bob made that comment. So
Steve, I
I've
think
always
you
appreciated
implemented the
That's what I said.
shrinking.
Inappropriate comments at inappropriate times.
Yep.
But
I love
bless
that.
you, John. Bless you. I'll never forget you for seeing that my name ended up in the manual.
Oh, of course.
Well, not of course, because not to bring a negative aspect to this, but there was a big bloodletting at Dynamics and Sierra Online, and 40 people were let go in the company. And as we know, in the glory of American business, once you're let go at a company, you no longer exist. But Mr. Cutter saw that my name was still attached to that project, even though I hadn't been there for a year by the time it came out. Thanks,
You were
John.
an important part of it. Sure,
Wow.
absolutely.
Jerry's taking a dig at you there, Bob.
I'm still trying to get Jerry on here. We're having some issues. Jerry Luttrell that's chatting over there on the right is also one of the folks that's supposed to be part of our panel together. We're having some technical issues getting him aboard, but I'm working with him trying to get him on.
Okay.
Peter Lukaszuk is also in
If I
the.
may, one more thing. I'm sorry, Vance. You
Oh,
go
I
ahead.
was just going to say Peter Lukaszuk is in the general chat as well. He's in the comment section.
Oh yeah.
So you
Hi,
can send
Peter.
an invite if you can.
From Poland. Peter's in
Yeah.
Poland.
I have no idea what time it is.
Yeah.
So,
Let me move on to our
This
next
is
question.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Bob. You want to finish?
I'll
your thought?
do this very quickly.
Yeah.
This is probably not interesting to most of the people who are tuning in here for this, but one of the motivations in doing this was that Dynamics had a tremendous investment of time and money in developing the 3-space engine, which in its time was really kind of a state-of-the-art 3D technology. Remember, this is before the PlayStation 1 came out and before 3D was common in game development. And the only way that the company was using it was in the flight sims that Damon Sly was designing. And so one of my limited contributions to this project came in the way of saying, look, we've spent all this money on this stuff. We should try to leverage it in other areas. And so we had Pat Cook use the 3-space engine to create front page sports football. So we got into the sports category. And then John took it and ran with it in getting us into the role-playing game category. So for what it's worth, it was partly an effort to find other ways to use this unique tech that Dynamics had at its disposal, which again, Peter, hey Peter again, was very involved in developing, along with his twin brother Derek.
Awesome. Okay, so the next question here, Mark, Vance, and Cher, you were all involved with creating the Mountain of Art assets for Betrayal at Krondor. Could you guys share with us your favorite memories, or even your not so favorite memories about bringing the characters, locations, and items of Mid Kinghead to
I'd
life?
love to jump in here. And I remember we were going to do hand illustrated little graphic panel comic book kind of style stuff. And look at the time involved in that. It's like, oh, this is going to take forever. So then we decided to make the costumes and take pictures and then digitize them. And I just remember building all those plastic armor sets, and and the spray paint, went through the whole of the atrium, and I'm sure we're making everyone sick. But I loved how everyone was involved in being a character. We had friends and family. We had a lot of the employees come in. I remember one time, Cher, I spent probably 2 hours with you in a chair getting the troll makeup put on. Then I took the elevator ride down to where we were doing the capture, and some random person joined the elevator. They're like, "You're the most well-fed troll I've ever seen." But it was a lot of fun just coming up with how do we solve this solution.
We were very creative, and everyone got involved. I have not a very good memory, and I have no brochure. I have nothing from this game. I have like 3 pictures of me putting makeup on somebody in the photo room with Dale and Mike, and they're in costume. They've got their props. We made so many props. I think isn't that the game that I made that costume where the guy looked like he was made out of stone? Do you remember a stone character?
Black Mirror, just mentioned in chat. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. I made all of those costumes in my basement, and I looked at the costume, my helpers. I had everyone helping on that stuff. There were so many characters, and it was all my job was not to design the costumes, but to take the drawings that Mike had made and of the characters and find people, put them in something that looked like that. And it was crazy. It was big. It was fun. It was very creative. I don't have a list of who played what. I don't know if that exists anywhere. Do you have any idea? I have a list. I think that I saw a list in a brochure that had the names of the people that were in costume, but I don't actually know who played what. Do you guys?
I have a vague memory of being in a meeting and Cher looking out the window and seeing maybe someone down on the street, and thinking that guy would be perfect for. And she left the meeting and ran down and grabbed him and asked him if he would. Do you remember doing that, Cher?
Oh my God! All the time. I had a Dynamics card, and I accosted people on the mall. I chased them down. I go, "I'll pay you $20 if you come, and I'll take your picture. It's not naked. You're in costume."
Personally, I don't think most people would have, if Cheryl was coming along, will you come with me and get naked with me? I think most people wouldn't have objected back in the day. But
oh no, I would never do that. But my kids, oh my gosh, I had teenagers, and Jack came in and demoed the games in the QA part, and I would stop the car and get out and chase some person down the street and give him my card, tell him to call me if they wanted to. And and almost everyone did. It was because we had so much fun. It was so creative then. There was just like, we were problem solving. And it was. Awesome.
And remember, at the time, using photorealistic imagery in games was virtually not done
Right.
at all.
Well, the
So
first
again, that's
one was,
another.
I came on board with David Wolf, which I think was the first time they digitized actors into a game. And then we did Heart of China, which was all actors. And then this one, which was heavy on some armor, and oh my gosh, the props that Doug made were just amazing.
Yeah.
But
Actually,
so
I'd actually like to invite just really quick that Vance has we had some things that were not human.
Yeah, that's where that's where I was headed to, Neil.
Okay, great.
Neil,
I'm going to pull up some photos here, Vance, if you want to speak
Okay.
to them. Put them up on the stream. There we go.
Yeah, this is the Wyvern, which was Mike came to me and he wanted he knew that I sculpted things, and he said, "Hey, here's a cool little project. We can't really go out and hire a dragon, so why don't you go ahead and create this?
oh my gosh, that's gorgeous.
And we will take pictures of it, and then have the artist clean it up like we did all the whole process. You take a picture, you develop the film, and then you scan in the film, and then you load it into D-Paint. And by the time we got this guy created and posed, and we took pictures and then dropped it down to, I don't know, 320 by 100, a lot of the detail was lost. So I think we ended up just, doing it from scratch, but it was still a whole lot of fun to do. And I still have parts of this. I have the head somewhere. It's very safe, but I have no idea where.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was a heck of a.
That's gorgeous.
That's as safe as it gets.
Yeah. Dale Tendick did a lot of the photos for Dynamics, and he did the photos for this. And it was great fun to work on, and it was made with Sculpey, traditional, the white stuff with coat hangers and tissue paper and glue. So no Fimo, none of the fancy sculpting stuff we have today. But yeah, I still have him somewhere, so he's mostly safe.
You mentioned Dale, and I remember when we were doing all these photographs, and digital SLRs had just come out, and he got a hold of one, and that saved us so much work and effort. So we didn't have to wait for the chemical, developing.
Oh, cool! I didn't know that.
I think it was about 2/3 of the way into the project. Good stuff.
Yeah, and
There used to be a folder, a 3-ring binder in the office at Dynamics. Hey, Jerry.
Hi, Jerry.
Jerry has joined us.
Slides of all of the actors with Cher's costumes. It was just wonderful to look through there. Heaven only knows whatever happened to that. It would be wonderful to still have that someplace.
I know. I don't have anything. When everything. We moved, and then, so much ended up in the trash. And I found a few things and grabbed them out, but I believe that Sean Sharp had, I gave him a couple of the props. And then a friend of mine who did some of the costumes, who helped me make some of the costumes, she had a costume shop. So I gave her a whole bunch of that stuff. And she knows this is happening. And she let me know that besides sending a picture of me in one of the costumes, she also said that she got a lot of use out of those over the years. But the costume shop is now gone, and the costumes are probably out. But we got a lot of good. They got a lot of good out of them. They were used for many a Halloween.
Sean still has a ton of that stuff.
Jerry.
Cool.
Hi, Jerry.
Hey guys, how you doing?
You want to give us a little intro on yourself, since you were having trouble getting in?
Jerry Luttrell. I was the head of marketing and PR at the time with Dynamics, and I was rather the intermediary between Ray Feist and the team. He and I, for some reason, we both had an extremely dry, twisted sense of humor, and we just clicked. And Krondor was something I had never done before. It was a category I had no familiarity with, and so I had to do like massive catch up on the books just to know what the fuck I was doing. Ray does not entertain fools. And so once I had a handle on all that, I got back with the team. They were bringing me up to speed on how they were adapting the freeze face technology, which at the time, as a marketing guy, I was scared to death. Because I was like going, how in the hell are you going to turn a flight sim technology into an RPG? And it's my job at the time was understanding the product, which I had to do with every game in order to do my job properly. Team managed all of the illustration and artwork for the packaging and manual. Then contact the press, salespeople, blah blah blah. Most of which none of you ever saw. But it was a hell of a lot of fun. That game was just unlike a lot of games I worked on. That one ran into very few technical snags going down the pike, which is extremely rare. And John and Neil and the rest of the team were very, very open to me just sticking my nose in where it probably didn't belong. But I had to do that as part of my job. And I also had to do that to understand what to do with the cover art, which involved at the time Roger Smith, who pretty much anybody in this audience is familiar with. Just
That painting is gorgeous.
Everything Roger did was gorgeous, but he was an utter complete pain in the ass to work with, and expensive as hell. He had no concept whatsoever of what a timeline was. And I'm like, you are killing me, because I've got, this is on the marketing side. This is not the technical side. So forgive me if I'm meandering off a little bit here. They blur. So you got PR, you got marketing, you got design, and then you had Ray. So I had to run everything by both the team and by Ray. Ray, of course, had the ultimate say. And he was actually pretty damn easy to work with, a hell of a lot easier to work with than Roger was, because you approach Roger with just the smallest tiny bit of alteration suggestions, and he would just wig out. And you wouldn't hear from him for like a week. And I'm like, I have ads to place, I have cover art to finish, and then I would have to go back to the team and make sure that nothing dramatically had changed. What do you got there?
Let's see. These are some of your, I think, your cell sheets.
Oh, dude. I
Yeah,
don't.
just pull it back a little bit away from and put it in front of your face. There you go.
Yeah. Oh, fuck.
That's Tom Brook.
Oh, okay.
And who was photographed for that piece of art.
I did not know that. I didn't have time to know that. That is honestly one of my most favorite pieces that Roger did.
It's just gorgeous. But his flights and his planes were hyper-real.
All of his work with the entire Great Warplane series was just amazing. And to what you were saying earlier, I was absolutely flabbergasted that when Dynamics closed down, things were just tossed into the dumpster.
I know those paintings.
Yeah. It was nuts. All those background paintings that Mike and Mr.
Brent
Burkett
Burkett.
had done. Yes, those were just amazing backgrounds.
His paintings were gorgeous.
So,
yeah.
Here's some different. Sorry to interrupt. Here's some different. I'll just throw it up on the screen. Some different cover possibilities that were being.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I remember all that.
Yeah,
that's painful.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that one very well.
Oh my God. Mm-hmm. I had to argue with Roger over the lettering on that for like a week. He did not want to change the logo coloring. Yep, same thing. And I'm like, this is boring as hell.
I think Peter Lewis ended up doing the 3D logo.
Tim, do you have the original there again to hold up so we can see the final logo? The cell sheet that you held up. I mean, just another person whose name I want to mention while we're on here.
This is the final one, I think.
The logo here was designed and executed by Peter Lewis.
Yes.
I think it's absolutely magnificent.
It's gorgeous.
My inappropriate comment on this one was I said, "Hey Peter, why don't you make it look like a piece of jewelry, like it's enamel?" And as Peter did so many times, it just came out far beyond what any of us, I think, ever could have dreamed.
Oh yeah,
just so iconic.
I think I remember we had gotten 3DS in house, and we're like, we got a 3D program, and we started, hitting logos with it and typefaces. Yeah, that was the first use of that stuff.
Did you guys,
right? DOS-based 3D Studio Max, I think.
Did you all start with a logo that Roger did a preliminary run on, or did you guys do that all on your own?
My memory is that Peter did it. It was Peter's work entirely. But that may not apply to the typography, Jerry. The initial typography may have been Roger Smith's idea.
We are all getting up there. So at that time, I had 3 major games launching simultaneously. And so they tend to all kind of blur together. The logo, the Krondor logo, is quite easily one of my most proud pieces of work that we ever turned out. It's whoever was responsible for it did such an amazing job. And I was talking with Neil when he was trying to replicate the shirts and such, and all of my original stuff is up in Oregon, and I'm down here in Texas right now. So I don't know. I have nothing, and I saved pretty much every single thing I could, and unfortunately, the agency that did all of the print work and embroidery and posters for Krondor obviously is no longer in existence. They normally store things on, a computer backup file, and I tried like hell to get a hold of them so I could give Neil something. The best I could do is find the cleanest image, drop it into an AI program, and tidy it up. But I'm like I said, to this day, we lost so much incredible pieces of art.
Yeah.
I'm so damn glad that the code and all of you, myself included, are still around.
So I kind of hate to jump in here, but we have some audience questions here. We're starting to press up against our stop time for the panel here.
Yeah, so I'm going to pull them up on screen here. Let's do it like a lightning round because we've got about 8 minutes. Here's the first question that came in. This actually came in last night. This person posted 3 questions for us well in advance. Hi, Neil.
Yeah.
How did you develop such a vocabulary and storytelling ability? I think you were in your early 20s when you wrote the script.
Okay, so how do I talk a lot? But no, it was just in terms of my vocabulary. Well, of course, that's kind of confusing. My parents were both school teachers. I come from a family of school teachers, and so I read a lot, and I'm still a voracious reader and everything else. My degree in college was actually in radio, television, film production, and so I kind of came into it from that angle or whatever. But it's just mainly about reading and having parents that were going to kick my butt, and my mom, who was determined to try to have me not sound like an Okie, because that's where it come from. And so I every once in a while I kind of still slip into it, but anyway, that's kind of the long and short of that.
Next question, same person for John and Neil. You guys created the best combat system, a turn-based one with a chess-like strategy. Never seen anything like it since, except maybe HOMM. Be curious to hear more.
Yeah, the combat system was probably the inspiration for that was the game Archon. I don't know if any of you remember Archon. It was sort of a chess-like game, only the characters, when they would come together, you would actually get into an arcade fight. And we didn't obviously include the arcade fight part of it, but I didn't want real-time combat. I wanted something that was a little slower and more strategic, but I wanted it to kind of have that feel of real-time combat. So that's sort of the genesis of our combat system in the game, I think. Did you have any other comments on that, Neil?
Not really. Just in terms of the combat stuff, in terms of the chess concept, that was mostly something that you had put forward.
The riddle lock chess. Yeah, that actually, Bob. It was another case where Bob had. I don't think he was a big fan of me wanting to include riddles in the game, and he said, "What if we do a console version? Are you going to have people spelling out the answer with a controller?" And I thought, "Oh no, I don't want that." So then I came up with the idea of putting letters on these locks on the tumblers. And the nice thing about that is it also, I think riddles are sort of inherently binary. You either get it or you don't. And the nice thing about the Mordell lock chest is you can actually kind of play around with the letters. If the first letter is R and one of the second letters is T, that's not going to work. So you can kind of solve it just by sort of playing. And I think that was important. So those came out well.
I did want to pop in really quick, is that we're kind of talking in the back channel about a few names I want to make sure we get said, and particularly in regards to the tumblers or the riddle chest. Alan Roberts is the guy who created all the riddles, and so we were really fortunate to have him drop into the party last night, and so It was really nice chatting with him last night. And another name I want to make sure that get popped on here is Mike McHugh, who was actually our art director for the project or whatever. And so he was Mark's boss, and so and he was kind of directing how the look of everything took place. So I just want to make sure that those names got heard, because it's really important. And another name also as well, while I'm at it, is also Nels Bruckner. Because Nels Bruckner was our lead programmer. I invited him, but Nels tends to be a very kind of quiet guy. He says,
Yeah,
He's a great guy.
He's a fantastic guy.
Yes, and he programmed the combat and system, and that the whole he implemented all the wild ideas for tables and statistics, and how one character fought against the other, and brought them to life with the little animations, and of course with the graphics from the rest of the art team. But yeah, he did it.
I remember Nels taught me to juggle, because I'd be sitting at the scanning station waiting for a scan. He goes, "I'm compiling. What are we going to do? Let's learn how to juggle."
I still know how to juggle as a result of compile time and waiting.
So another question. I have no idea how to pronounce this name, so I'm not even going to try. They're wondering, was performance the only issue of the final game, not having smooth movement, but step-based instead?
So it was, I guess, yeah, performance was a big deal. But I'm just trying to make sure I get the question right. Can you read that again? It was, what was the key
partially
focus
because
of
the game was sort of tile based, right? Didn't that also?
So I think that was an interesting juxtaposition too. Is like having a 3D world, and then having a turn-based combat. And so I remember there being some discussion and struggle about, do we, like, there's characters that would be in the 3D world that would then when you enter a combat, they would show up in similar locations in a screenshot of the 3D world in the background of the combat screen. And so there was discussions about, do you make it real time in a 3D world or not, and I think the decision ended up being that we would also do a turn-based thing in the 3D world as well.
Okay.
Tim knows much better than I, of course, because he was down to the metal with this thing. But in the simulation games that we were doing, given the processing power we had to work with, we would struggle to get 12 frames a second.
Yes.
Which, of course, nowadays we're pissed off if we can't get 120 frames a second. So,
there was a struggle. There was a struggle on trying to maintain the performance, and I think one of the largest programming challenges was trying to reduce it to fit in the limited amount of memory, and using the memory extenders, and trying to make it so you don't have to spend a week editing your autoexec.bat file, and like, I can't remove the mouse driver. I still need that.
I remember Sound and Music being so pissed at us because we'd dive into their memory and be stealing bits of it.
Yeah,
like, we still need to have to sound like something.
Yeah. The end of the project was challenging and fun, though, because we added a lot of polish in the last 3-4 months that really made a difference in the final product.
So as regards to the question that we've got up on the screen right now, how much older Dungeon Master Eye of the Beholder games and influenced to game design? John?
A lot. I loved both of those games. And I definitely wanted us to be making a game that was closer to that than, say, Might and Magic at the time. If you remember Might and Magic, when you would walk into a room, it would just be 4 walls, but the description would say you walk into a bustling tavern, there's people and drinks being served, but you couldn't see any of that. And that always kind of bothered me. So I liked that. I liked the graphical fidelity and presentation of those two games.
Another question: who were the actors for the actual main guys, Owen, Gorath, and whatnot? Do you guys remember?
We were talking about it at the party last night, and I was kind of scratching my head. I know Peter Lewis had sent me a picture of him in an outfit, but I think Peter was just one of the generic Moradel fighters. I don't think.
Yeah.
But as far as Owen and Gorath, I was just kind of scratching my head last night. It's like I feel really terrible. I should know these things, but both Owen or at least I know Gorath was one of our QA guys, and Owen was, I believe, as well.
Can you show me their pictures?
I don't have them kind of in the bank here, so
yeah, I don't either.
But
well, anyway, I might recognize them if I saw them.
Okay,
But anyway,
so David.
So another person's asking if there is concept art of the characters and is any of it available anywhere. They'd love to see it. I think that similar questions to that kept coming up in the chat.
So would we.
yeah,
maybe in a flat file somewhere. I don't know.
All of Mike McHugh's drawings, which then I took and found a person to put into that look. But everything that I did was based on what he drew. And he had a very strong masculine style of drawing. I don't have a single drawing of that.
Oh, that's a shame.
But,
I don't know that anyone does.
Yeah, it's honestly, I've been harassing, everyone who was associated with the game that I can recall. I've been harassing all of these folks for a long time simply because I just wanted it for my own personal archive of stuff. And
right. I wonder if Mike even has them.
Don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. But those would be fun to see because they were cool drawings.
I'm seeing
if anybody out there locates anything, like here's the guys they want.
Yes,
it.
Right. Sure. Dial 1-800.
People discover random things in the attic.
So I will apologize to Glukes about the Moradel lock chess. It did make me think though that I must have had a dozen people come up to me over the years that said the exact same thing, that every time they would hear the Moradel lock music come on, their wife or girlfriend would run in from the other room and sit down with them so they could solve the riddle together.
Yes.
John,
I heard that at least a dozen times. At least a dozen times.
That's so fun.
John, I still have a copy of the 1 or 2 page little write-up design for what it should look like. We didn't use we didn't have a PowerPoint to draw a little fancy picture, so it has a little hand-drawn drawing on it of what it should look like and how it will work.
Wow. Yeah, I'm terrible at drawing. By the way, it looks like Steve left, but I did want to just quickly call out the entire engineering team for doing such a great job. And Steve, in not to call him out above anyone else, but there were several times where we would do something and we'd go, man, we need to change this and get this working in one of our morning meetings. And Steve would go, I did that this weekend. Like without asking, no one asked him to do it. He just realized that we were probably going to want that. And then he did it over the weekend.
Well,
it
and
happened more than once.
And then he would say, well, yeah, it's in the code right now. You just got to uncomment it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I did that 2 months ago. Honestly, I think that's why the game didn't have a lot of technical issues when it launched. I tell people that as a producer, I was a very good game designer. I thought we were probably 4 months away from launching, so I started a beta testing program, and it turns out we were more like a year away from launching. So we were in the beta program for a really, really long time, and we would have meetings every day, and we would, at least once a week, and we would go through the beta comments, and a lot of them we said, okay, let's fix this. We just can't. We don't have time to fix this. But those things kept coming up over and over again, and eventually Tim and Nels and Steve would just go, I'm tired of having this come up, and so they'd go and fix it. And by the time the game launched, it didn't have a lot of issues.
Yeah. I'm actually going to dive in on John's question right there, and just going to say is that, I was really super proud, and I talked to various people about dynamics and everything else, and it is astonishing how bug-free Betrayal at Krondor was. There were a handful of bugs that we had, but particularly when you compare it to a lot of other games of its time, which were just bug fests. And it's all the more astonishing given the fact that now I can't prove this by any metric that I can lay out there, but I will say is that we threw what was probably combinatorially one of the most complex games to test that Dynamics ever had to test. And the fact that it was, because it was so complicated, the fact that it came out as smooth as it did is just astonishing to me. And so, we had a stellar, outstanding QA in house. I know somebody asked that question on or whatever. And so, whenever we had stuff come up, I just was really always happy that we had a really good relationship with QA, and particularly Forrest Walker, who was our coordinator for that. And so he was a good guy, and I really appreciated all the things that working with us as much as he did. And so, and all that text. I'm sorry, guys, so much text.
Quick story. We were nearing completion of the game, getting ready to launch in a month, 2 months. I don't think any of us had any idea whether the game was going to be successful or not. In fact, I at one point was getting ready to take my name off of the box because I suddenly thought, what on earth have we done here? We made a role-playing game where we introduce a character at the beginning of the game in the first chapter and then take him away and you don't get to see him again for 2 or 3 more chapters. That's not what people want in a role-playing game. So I was really, really nervous. And then all of a sudden we started hearing these stories about QA. Yeah, QA was here till midnight playing. And I, of course, put my producer hat on and said, we can't afford to pay overtime. And said, no, they're just playing because they're having a good time. They want to see what happens next. And that was the first indication that I had that the game might actually do okay.
Bob, did you actually think that?
What?
Did you think the game was going to do well? What did you think before we launched?
I was cut loose before you got to that point. But hearing you talk about that, I remember our conversations that you and I had, that one of our priorities was that the game have actual literary value. And then you stepped up with the idea of using the Feist stuff, which further reinforced that. And thanks to both you and Neil, the game that was, for me, that was a primary thing, that it had literary value, and you guys did it. And even before I left, that was clear. So it doesn't surprise me that the QA guys got into it. But nobody can know if a game is going to be a big success. All I knew is that we had some of the best people I ever worked with on the bloody thing.
I think we're really fortunate now because now, thanks to that kind of push for the literary background, we're now like in English classes with Bronte and with Jane Austen.
Oh yeah, let's just all pat ourselves on the back.
Well, I mean, it's the 30th anniversary. That's what you should be doing at this point. And I want to point out, 30 years since the video game came out, this has been an incredibly active live chat during this conversation. There's a definite affinity and love for the game that you guys put so much effort into. And as somebody who enjoys games, who enjoys storytelling, I applaud you all for the accomplishment on Betrayal at Krondor. Its legacy obviously is still alive, and there's still people who incredibly fondly remember playing the game and want to talk about it and want to dive in with you on the background. Unfortunately, we've got time and we got to keep moving forward here because we got other things we need to share with people. But I wanted to share 3 comments before we cut the panel loose. So this person unfortunately had to leave because they needed to get to work. But they wanted to say thank you all for being such a great part of their childhood. And I think that's gorgeous, right? Like to be an important part of somebody's childhood is amazing. And then Pali Rami says, this kind of gathering wouldn't be possible unless everyone loves their work. And the game you created is iconic in every sense of the word. And I think that's a beautiful sentiment as well. And one more.
Thank you, Kelly.
Gluck says, hello, just want to say thanks for the great game. Loved the music and covered many of the tunes on piano myself. Thanks for the memories.
Yeah, and actually, Luke, I've listened to your cover, and so you did a lovely job with it. I also just wanted to really quickly say something about last night. We of course had a party here in Eugene we had several of the devs from the team, but also from Dynamics drop in. We had two fans flew in from quite a distance. So one gentleman came from Las Vegas, and the other gentleman came from Providence, Rhode Island. To come and join us last night. And so, and then you're going to hear a little bit more from a fellow. You were talking earlier about Damian making comments over in whatever. You're going to be hearing some stuff from him. Damian's over in Slovenia and making his own kind of imitation of Betrayal at Krondor, a spiritual sequel, as he calls it, to Betrayal at Krondor. And so we have some hardcore fans out there, and I want to kind of acknowledge them and all. And so, these folks have been talking with each other and interacting with each other. So we have a lot to thank our fans for, just in terms of kind of keeping the memory of this game alive.
Yeah, beautiful. To all of you on the panel, thank you guys so much for taking the time to share your memories and your fun stories. Like, I think anybody who's got any interest in anything like video games or filmmaking, we all love to hear the behind the scenes stories, because in the end, it's people who bring these stories to us. It's their passion. It's their creative drive that gets something birthed into life that we all get to enjoy. And to have a moment to share that with you is a special treat for everybody who's a fan of the thing you created. So thank you for taking the time to share with everybody.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, David.
And thanks to all the
everybody.
fans as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I'll never
All
Great
right.
to see you all.
It's great to see you.
So you all gonna hang out?
I am.
You all can hang out in the private chat here. Neil, you going to stick around with me for the next guest?
Yeah, so I'm going to stick around. And so while the other material runs, if we have any questions kind of come up in the chat, I'll try to answer them over in the chat. And so any of the rest of the people that are hanging out. So while the other material runs, we have we have an interview coming up with Kilgore Trout next. And then after that, my friend Goldie Thoughts, who runs most of the back related fan pages, she's going to be back with some interviews that taped with some of the fans. And so, but I'll be hanging out here on the chat. And so if you have questions regarding to the things they're talking about, or just further questions here, I'll try to answer. And any of the rest of you folks who, rest of my panelists that want to hang out and do that, you're welcome to do that as well.
Excellent.
Neil, how do we do that?
So if you look over there, you'll have a comments bar on the far right. And so if you just post a comment below, everybody should be able to see your responses over there.
Okay, so it'll be chat, but not video.
Yes, it'll just be chat.
Okay.
All right, guys. Okay, I'm gonna start taking you off the screen because I gotta move
right.
on. Kilgore's been
Bye,
waiting.
folks.
Cheers.
Bye, everybody. All right. I wish there was a take everybody off the stream at once button. Here we go. All right. Hey, Neil. Okay, let's bring Kilgore up. Here we go. Hello. Welcome. There. So Kilgore Trout, you're Vonnegut inspired nom de plume of one of the best known Twitch streamers for GOG.com, along with being one of their most frequent streamers. You're also one of Betrayal at Krondor's biggest fans. So let's dive in with you a little bit and get your insights on the game.
Oh, sure. It goes back a long way. It's really funny when I hear people talk about how this game meant so much in their childhood. And it definitely meant a lot to my childhood, even though I was like 31 when this came out. But yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your history as a gamer and how you started working with GOG.com.
Well, of course, this goes back years. If you had told me, like even 10 years ago, that in years to come, I would be like, playing video games live and having like, hundreds of people watching and whatever, I would be, like, who are you kidding? But it's amazing to see how things have developed throughout all of the years, going right back to Krondor. I mean, I'm like most people, I have always been into games before even computer games. You know, I used to do tabletop games and whatnot, and always into entertainment. I became a musician later on, so everything creative and whatnot. But anyway, throughout the years, I got involved with computers and of course got into gaming. And so basically, when it comes to Krondor, again, just playing a variety of different types of games. I had a fondness for RPGs and whatnot, and I had read in like a Computer Gaming World magazine about this game coming up based on the novels of Raymond Feist, who I have to admit I had not read, and I still haven't read, which is a shame, and I obviously should. But I had this article. I actually still have the magazine, but that talked about Betrayal at Krondor, and I thought, well, this looks like a good game coming up. And I went to the local game store, as I would do every week, and there's the box for Betrayal at Krondor, and I basically just looked at it and thought, well, okay, this looks really good. Yeah, fine. And I took it home, and then for the next, I'd say 3 weeks, this was my world, and it just totally. I was totally immersed in this, like unlike any other game prior, except some of the early Ultimas and whatnot. They were always involving, but the thing about Krondor for me was that it was such a conglomeration of different styles. It's limiting to just call it an RPG,
right?
You know. So as far as someone who enjoys a variety, I like, I'm not much of a strategy gamer, but I definitely like, sort of action things and point and click adventure games, and I like puzzle games, and Krondor is like a conglomeration of all of that linked together by this extremely involved narrative. It was just an immersive game that just took over my life for 3 weeks. And I've played it multiple times since then.
What do you get out of the replays? Because I know, as a filmmaker, I can watch movies a million times and I get a different experience every time I go through it. And as a gamer, what is the appeal of revisiting a game? How does revisiting Betrayal at Krondor change your experience, or what do you get out of it on a second or third play?
That's a good way to think of it, because actually I'm a big movie buff as well. I've got a large collection of like DVDs and Blu-rays and whatnot. And people often ask me, why would you want to own these? You watch it, you're done, right? But there are movies. I mean, I've seen The Maltese Falcon about 20 times, I think, for example. And the thing about it is, like, I know all the word, like in a movie in particular, I know the dialogue, I know the actors, I know what's going to happen. But I relive it every time I see it, the delivery of the lines, when you're slapped, you'll take it and like it, that kind of thing. I just can't wait to hear that line being read. And when it comes to a game, it's that element of just enjoying it. But at the same time, especially with a game as rich as Krondor, you can always find new stuff in it, because it's such a large, huge open world that just number one, experiencing the game, exactly, Pest, experiencing the game every time, I know I'm playing Krondor. When I'm playing other games, if I'm playing Doom and has a certain style, and obviously, and you're running around, you're shooting stuff. Krondor has a particular sort of a style that I can't think of any other game that's even remotely like it.
Right.
And like I say, it's limiting to call it an RPG, because it isn't specifically an RPG of sorts. There are a lot of obviously RPG elements, and it is a game, and you are kind of role playing, so to speak. But it's also so much more. It's an adventure game. It's a narrative based, plot based story that's still an open world game that allows you to explore like crazy. It's just a massive, big world. So every time you enter into it, of course, I know where this is, I know where that is, and I know what I'm going to do this next. But just going through it, and just the joy of the combat itself is always good. There's just so many elements that just come together.
Right. How do people watching your streams of Krondor react to it? And do you have a sense about who the audience is? Are they mostly older players, reliving their childhood memories, like some of our audience today, or do you think it's registering with newer fans as well?
Well, of course, there is a certain aspect. Well, definitely, I get a lot of people come in and say who, they'll first say, "Oh, I'm glad to see someone playing this game and whatnot." and so many people who talk about how this was like their childhood, or this was a game that just totally inspired them, and then other people who say, I can't believe I don't know this game. You know, so there are still people who were gaming at the time who this game just sort of got by them. Maybe because they were playing Doom at the time and death matching on the internet or whatever, you know. But it's just a game that happened to slip by, you know, or for whatever reason. But certainly, the other aspect, of course, is that for a modern contemporary audience, the game is obviously somewhat archaic in the sense that, of course, it doesn't compare graphically to games of today, and it doesn't have the 200 FPS frame rate or anything like that. But there are a lot of people out there who can look at past all of that sort of like contemporary stuff and look back at this game and recognize it for what it is, which is just a real jewel of the time, and that still, I think, looks and plays fabulously.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, some people today might not take to it because they're so used to the contemporary stuff. But anybody who has any kind of an inclination towards looking at not only just the past of video games and from that period, if you want to see really good game design that just miraculously comes together when you think about the fact of all the various different elements that make this game up. It's like I say, it's not just an RPG. It's this, that, and so many different things. But it all coalesces into this great experience. And I think a lot of modern games can take a lesson from just doing, going back to this game and seeing what these people did 30 years ago. You know, it's marvelous, you know?
Yeah. Well, and Pest Monolith says story writing. And I think that's really key. And I think in the era where frames per second or just how fast can this thing run? How fast can it run? You know, how quickly can I move through it? What's the action? Like, I always come back to, is it enjoyable as a story to follow? You know, is this something I want to devote days or weeks or months of my time to?
Well, it's a game that like, for example, obviously when I was playing it, anytime that I'm playing it, and when I was first playing it, I wasn't sitting there thinking, do I want to do this? Or I was just too busy playing the game. I was involved in it. And then, well, I better go to bed. I got to work. Okay. So, so you go to bed, and then you come home from work, and the first thing you do, well, okay, back into Krondor, and you just live in that world. And, and as challenging and frustrating as it could be, as one of the things that I always tell people who come and watch the stream and they've never seen the game before, and they're looking to try it out. And the first thing that I say is, okay, I know you're supposed to go to Krondor, right? First off, you're supposed to go to Krondor, but don't. No, because if you go straight for Krondor, you're going to have a hell of a time because you're just going to be underpowered. You get to chapter 2 and you're screwed, because what you're supposed to do is really explore and go everywhere and find everything that you can do. And that's the whole thing about the game. It's a combination of a story-based, narrative-based, character-based game that tells a definite story. But at the same time, it's a vast, big, open world game that you can just get lost in and explore and find new things all the time.
Yeah.
And
that's really it. Later. Like, everybody's talking about open world games now, and Krondor was already that 30 years ago.
Yeah. It was an open world game, but at the same time, there was a definite plot line. But you could vary from it. And inevitably, you had to come back to it.
Yeah.
And you wanted to come back to it because you wanted to get, the story, which is the thing that makes the whole game really work, because everything has a meaning. Even when you're off on a side quest, it's still sort of related to the world, and it just sort of populates the whole experience, so that even though you're not on the plot, you're doing something that at least is related experientially or to the overall feel of the game. It's just there's no other game like it out there, really.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Oh, you were saying about GOG. That was again, when I started to this goes a quick little story. This goes back to around 2015 when I realized that I had yeah, like a few hundred game boxes that were in my closet. I wasn't playing a lot of these games anymore, and I thought, well, I'm gonna have to clear out some space. So I decided, well, I'm gonna get rid of a lot of these boxes, and I'll keep the games though. And so I cleared these things out. And as I was going through this, and I thought, well, some of these games are probably available digitally, I suppose, if I wanted to pick them up. And that's when I found out about GOG, and that's when I found out about streaming and the whole idea that people. I mean, I was living in a little bit of a bubble where I was a gamer going back decades, but it really didn't occur to me that that so many people had such a fun, I mean, obviously people like myself had such a love for this, but that there was such this vibrant community of people who still lived these retro games and whatnot, and appreciated all of the materials and boxes and the all the different magazines and everything else. And then I gradually got into this world, and just through my experience, and got into streaming, got myself a webcam, and I said, well, I've got a lot of these games here, and I can, games that aren't available digitally and whatnot. And but anyway, that's how I got to know GOG, and eventually started streaming on GOG. And I think a big part of any kind of a reputation that I've developed over the years is because of again, the fact that I didn't work in the industry, but I worked in a computer store selling video games for a number of years through the 90s. I was, and I was back then, I wasn't just a child, not to disparage anybody who is, but I wasn't just a child who grew up in the 90s. I was an adult through the 90s, and I was an adult playing games at a time when it was kind of childish to be a game player. Now everybody plays games.
Everybody plays games now.
Yeah. So now here I am years later. I mean, I just turned 60, and I stream for people who are, all different ages. And getting back to Krondor, this is a game that, again, anyone who I think appreciates quality games, not just what's the latest and greatest, but anybody who appreciates quality games can look at a game like Krondor and be impressed by it, and the fact that when I'm streaming it and I get that response from people who either love the game because they grew up with it, or they never saw it before and are shocked that they missed it, or whatever.
Yeah. So I understand you started a new replay of it on Twitch to celebrate Krondor's anniversary. Can you let people know where they can go to pick up on where you are so far, and let us know where they can continue the journey with you?
Yeah, sure. And actually, I just got to Krondor. After spending 18 hours, I started there Thursday night and streamed for like 6 hours, and then last night I did a 12-hour extravaganza, which I'm glad is over. But anyway, there you go. But I, of course, a good example, when you don't just go straight for Krondor, I explored everywhere, went to the Dimwood, everywhere, and picked up all kinds of stuff and whatever. So I just got to the sewers underneath Krondor. So I'm not sure exactly what days I'm going to be doing it next week, but I'm going to be switching my schedule around a little bit to encompass these two, probably next weekend, I would think. But anyway, I am on twitch.tv/Kilgore Trout, and it's spelled, as you can see, with zeros and the underscore, because there's 1,800 million Kilgore Trouts on Twitch, probably.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experience with the game, and thank you for sharing it on your Twitch stream with the world. And
absolutely, my pleasure.
Spreading the joy of this game with the population. Really appreciate it. Thank you for taking
my pleasure. I had no choice. I mean, I had to do this, right?
Right.
Anyway, thanks very much.
Thank you, Kilgore. Appreciate it. And let's see. So we're a little behind schedule, but we're going to keep moving forward here. So we're going to play a video now. It's a Feist flashback. So it's an interview with the author and Goldie Thoughts interviews as well. So I hope you'll enjoy this. I know Neil and some of the team from the panel are still sitting with us, and they're answering questions and comments in the chat. So please stick with us to the very end. I know they'll be here answering your questions and being available for all of you who are fans of this game and are enjoying running down the memories and the history of of what really was a revolutionary game at the time and continues to be beloved by so many. So here is our video, and thank you guys for joining us.
As a consumer, years ago, I played computer games like most of the people who went to college in the 70s on the mainframes after hours when I was supposed to be compiling runtime code. As a participant in creating them, about almost 2 years ago, when I got a phone call from my agent saying some folks in Eugene, Oregon had contacted him and wanted to talk to me about the possibility of doing something based upon my work. And that was the seed from which Betrayal at Krondor sprung. Well, the world of Midkemia began as a role-playing environment for a bunch of college students back in the 70s. Like kids everywhere, my friends in college and I were broke. Fantasy role-playing was a very inexpensive hobby relative to a lot of other things we could be doing. You basically needed some pencils, some paper, and some funny-looking dice, and a lot of imagination. And the history of the world began to unfold. Well, that started 19 years ago. So there's almost 2 decades worth of thought and creation in Midkemia. It's possibly one of the most involved and detailed world environments for creating games around today. Obviously, the world in which the game is played is the fruit of years of my work, but the game itself is a wonderful collaborative endeavor that I think adds tremendously to the world of Midkemia. When I do a book, I've got a totally limitless casting, special effects, costuming budget. You know, I can blow up a city, which I did in Darkness of Sethanon. I can make a character look and sound exactly like James Mason, and he's been dead for some number of years. I can have Sir Laurence Olivier delivering the King's speech in the chapter, you know, at the end of Darkness of Sethanon, because it's all in my head. The characters in the game Betrayal at Krondor may not look exactly like I envision them, but that's fair, because what the reader of the book sees in their head doesn't match exactly what I envision. And their vision of that character from what I've described is just as valid as mine. Well, when I first played Betrayal at Krondor, it was a very odd, pleasant but odd experience to be encountering things in my world that I hadn't authored. It was surprising, and it was unexpected, and it was fun. It's interesting to see someone else who has some talent take your work and go do something original with it and bring it back to you, and to be presented with surprises. And I think that's the best part about it for me, is I was surprised by many things in Betrayal at Krondor. And of course, I'm never surprised in my own work, or rarely anyway. You know, I kind of know how the book's going to end when I start it. For the reader of my work, I think Betrayal at Krondor will be a welcome addition to the vast material they've already been exposed to. The fact that you're going back and visiting old friends is a lot of the appeal. It's new adventures with Jimmy the Hand and Prince Arutha, and some new characters, some people you've never met before. For somebody who's ignorant of my work, the game still stands on its own as a very enjoyable playing experience. What it is a novel, if you will, an interactive novel, that you are allowed to make decisions, where the author essentially turns to you on page 24 and says, fine, what do you want them to do next? And I think that's why it's a very different kind of role-playing game and a very different kind of experience for the readers. The action in Betrayal at Krondor occurs between the books Darkness at Sethanon and Prince of the Blood, about halfway between them, as a matter of fact. So for someone who's read the books, everything will flow very easily and be familiar. And for somebody who hasn't read the books, it's a nice computer game with some interesting environments and characters that maybe will interest them enough to go read the books. It's what's in any good adventure story. It's Robert Louis Stevenson's Kidnapped. It's Treasure Island. It's The Three Musketeers. It's daring do and adventure and mystery and magic and murder and mayhem and strange lands with foreign people and colorful characters. It's a Saturday matinee when you're 12 years old. It's a wonderful adventure. This is a kind of a fun game to put in the corner of your hard drive and call up every once in a while. Just like it's taking a book out and reading it on a break and then putting it away for a while. The game is designed so that you have bookmarks. Literally, they call them bookmarks, where you can say, I'm saving the game right here at this point, at any point in the game. It's not one of those horrible, miserable games where you have to battle your way back to a particular location before you're allowed to save the game. So you can play it in little, teeny, manageable chunks, and it's a wonderful, rich experience.
Midkemia, a realm of enchantment and ancient magic, where elves, dwarves, and an apprentice magician once battled an unimaginable evil. A battle which raged across the great gulfs of space and time. Winner of the Compute Choice Award for Best Fantasy Role-Playing and Adventure Game, based on the best-selling fantasy tales of Raymond Weiss. A revolutionary adventure of villains and heroes, magic and men. Betrayal at Krondor, from Dynamix.
Hi fellow Betrayal at Krondor fans, my name is Jen and I run a Twitch channel called Goldie Thoughts. What I've done over the past couple of months is find like-minded people, just like myself, who have loved playing Betrayal at Krondor from literally all over the globe. I hope that you enjoyed this compilation of clips, and thank you so much for watching. You remember how you found out about Betrayal at Krondor the first time you heard about the game?
Yes, I do, because aside from it being a good game, it actually has a sentimental part of my childhood.
Yeah.
Okay? Because, you see, back then, when I was a young kid, right, my dad gave me a Macintosh, right?
Okay.
And I was a big gamer. I know I used to play NES and all that. But for anybody, who's ever played a PC back then, everybody knows that the Apple didn't exactly have a lot of them.
That's true.
Right?
Yes.
So,
yes.
like, my choices were considerably limited. So whatever games I had, like, I really, really, really latched onto because that's all I had, right? So there were two in particular that I latched onto. The first was Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis.
Oh yeah, that's an amazing classic. Okay, yes.
Yeah, and that was also my introduction to SCUM system. But the other one was Betrayal at Krondor, because I remember I never actually asked him how he got it because I never saw him play it. But he had the box. Right?
Okay, yeah.
I've never seen him play it ever, so I never understood why he actually had a copy of the box. But I remember as a kid, right, looking at that and then reading the manual.
Oh,
and the manual looked amazing.
Yes, it did.
It wasn't just some thin booklet that it actually showed the characters. It had some sample spells. It actually had production value to it, for lack of a better term. So I got wow, what in the world was this? So I actually installed it.
I'm pretty sure that I first came across it in Interaction Magazine, which was Sierra's company magazine, where they would promote all of their new games. And I remember being very excited about the concept. I think it was quite a bit later before I actually bought the game, because I was kind of like working my way through like we were saying, like King's Quest, and Quest for Glory, and a bunch of those sorts of things.
I recall seeing an article about it in a magazine, game magazine, when I was like 11 years old, and I thought, oh, that looks neat, but I didn't think anything of it at the time until I remember my grandfather saw an ad in the paper of a guy wanting to sell some used video games that he played. And, growing up without a lot of money, getting it used from a guy who doesn't want it anymore is the way to go. So my grandfather took me over to the guy's house. We sat down with this person, and he talked with him for like a ridiculous amount of time about the games. We ended up buying them, and one of the games was Betrayal at Krondor.
It was, I don't know, I must have been 13, maybe 14. It was 93, 94. So basically, a short while after it launched. There was a new magazine, games magazine, basically here in Slovenia, called Magazine. That was this issue that had Betrayal at Krondor inside. It was a one-page review, riddled with mistakes. But back then, I didn't know anything about, the Midkinia, mystified universe, these types of games. But the review was really, really inspiring, and so I basically tried to get that game in any way possible. Back then, here in Slovenia, piracy was quite still a big thing, because legal copies you could not get, at least at the beginning. And I'm ashamed, but that's what I did. I dialed up a number of a local pirate, and he sent me 6 discs. Of them, which one of those was damaged, the last one, so I could not play it. I called again. Yeah. He sent me that disc again. It was damaged again. And
my gosh!
That maybe I felt like I wasn't destined to play it. It must have happened 3 or 4 times before I actually got to install it. But then I, in the same magazine, that was an ad for basically a shop selling legal games, and that was Betrayal at Krondor in there. So I grabbed it. It did not have a box. It was just a CD, a manual, and map. But that's where I installed it, and loved it ever since.
I did not understand, because I literally found this. Well, actually, it was my grandfather's game. Remember, I was a kid, and he was just buying Sierra games at the time. And his experience with finding is this game was recommended to him. I think he went to Babbage's or Electronics Boutique at the time, and they were like, this game is getting a lot of recognition in magazines, oddly enough, which is how you found it, Damian, through a magazine as well. So he was like, all right, I guess I'll get it. And then he took it home, because it was his hobby, is just doing CRPGs at the time. And I pushed him out of the chair, and I said, this is now my game. No, I'm playing, not literally, but how was he to think this like 12-year-old girl would be interested in this like text-based like fantasy CRPG? But that's just what happened. But
the weirdo.
Yeah, what 12-year-old's like? No, I know. I want to talk about armor and swords.
The very, very first time, my very first thought of playing that, and bear in mind, before I say that, please bear in mind that this is the mind of a kid, like a really young kid who doesn't know any better. But I remember thinking, this game sucks.
Yeah, it's right? Like heavy reading a lot. We'll get into that later.
Heavy reading.
Yes.
But not just that, but I remember complaining about, why is the mana system relying on the health? Like the wizard already is pretty weak, and you're telling me that to cast my powerful spells, I had to, use whatever little health he had. Yep. And I remember really complaining about that. But then as I went on, obviously, like I said, I didn't really have a choice. I began to appreciate the nuances. Like, I realized, wait a minute, the reason why I was always complaining about the health is because I always maxed out the fireball, the flame cast, and so of course he would run out of health. Okay, I had to pull back a bit. I had to be smart about it, and the more I played it, the more I realized I appreciated it. Like I appreciated the complexities of it. And then as I continued to play other games, and then eventually finally I got a PC and played other RPGs, and then I always went back to it. Not necessarily because it was necessarily a better game, at least in the context of games, game mechanics, and gameplay loops, but the fact that until now I have not played a game like it. Yeah. And I'm not exaggerating. Like, even to this day, I cannot think of a single game that's like it and its sequels quote unquote sequels.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Right. So
there was a Return to Krondor.
Yeah, Return to Krondor and Betrayal at
Tara.
But yeah, and I kept thinking like, yeah, like that. I think that's one of the reasons why I really appreciate it, because to this very day, I cannot think of a game like it.
Yeah.
Chapter 1 is so vast. You can access most of the map in Chapter 1. You can go to places that you're not meant to go to. And even with that, the developers put time into having things that you could do in these areas right from the beginning. And quests that you can start in Chapter 1 or Chapter 2 that lead on later into other follow-on parts later in the story. Like, things are not static. You will go back to places, you will do things back in these places, and you will see the consequences of things you have or have not done.
Yep. What you said spawned someone's interest in chat. Artemadoris is saying so you could actually clear an area and it stayed clear.
Yeah, it did stay clear, and it although if you in between chapters, the certain areas would repopulate, right? And but also if you solved something or killed something in one chapter, then it would affect it in the next chapter. For example, I remember that encounter in the dim with where there were scorpions and someone trapped in the house, right? If you got rid of those scorpions, I guess the next chapter, I'm not sure what happened. I forgot, but it had repercussions.
Yes, it did. I forgot as well. I think there was a poisoned well, I want to say as well, behind the house. Something like that, but I know what you're talking about. If you revisit it in another chapter, there was a different dialogue. I remember. You're right.
I think if you did not solve that combat encounter in the first or second, I don't know which chapter you went back there in chapter 4, I think, or chapter 4, yeah, I think. Then that person was not there. Maybe was dead, I don't know.
I definitely enjoy Betrayal at Krondor's combat significantly more than Planescape Torment.
Yeah, all the Mortals and the blue cloaks. So I'm like, oh yeah, no, those are the bad guys. It was easy for me to dig it out when I was a kid. That and the pirates with the red bandanas. So
the Rusalka, like those, they get me.
Yeah, they were frightening when I was a child. They were very frightening to me. I was like, oh, I know, like if I go by the Silden area and this part of the coast, like sometimes when I was younger, even though you're not supposed to, like they make side quests where you're deliberately not supposed to do this, but like I would want to run through that area so badly and not even fight anybody and just pell-mell hug the mountains on the western side and go up the coast and not even want to face. But they make it to where you have to encounter Rusalka and fight them because that's the only way like you can feel better or whatever and have to go back to the temple. So it's like, okay, but I mean, there's a couple of scenes that were pretty scary. There was a few horror elements in the game. I remember, I'm not going to get it. Okay, wait, I have to think. No, I won't say certain things, but but going into the Rusalka, that was a little bit horrific because there's this one.
No spoilers. I didn't beat it yet.
No, you're right. I was like, oh goodness. There's one scene where you go into a fisherman's hut in there and you get like your fortune told by this lady, and she turns into a Rusalka and you have to run outside and fight her real quick because she was sad about like losing her daughter and she communicated with spirits and now they inhabited her body. So yeah, there's definitely a little bit of horror element in there that when I was playing I was like, this is really scary to like an 11, 12-year-old kid. Yeah.
I was going to just bring that particular house up in an example of how even the spooky elements are very nuanced. And then the opportunists who are taking advantage of rumors of these things to extort higher prices and things like that. Very nuanced, all of it.
I remember encountering the Nighthawks was always terrifying.
Yes.
especially when they would rise up from the dead as black slayers.
Yeah. First Nighthawks mention. I had someone talk about the Rusalkis with me, but absolutely the Nighthawks I thought were incredibly intriguing when I first encountered them. I'm like, I want to learn more about this cult. Like, they seem so sinister and amazing. That's super cool.
Yeah, I still remember the one that really hit it for me was that guy who's supposed to teach you how to play chess.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
They established that this guy, you can pay him sovereigns to teach you how to play chess. But there was this one dialogue line where you just simply talk about en passant.
Yes.
Which is, very... Yeah. And what I like about it is that it's a completely useless dialogue. There's absolutely no reason to go to that dialogue. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't have to do with chess. But the fact that they put the time to have an entire conversation, a long conversation of that, just talking about that. It's an actual chess rule.
That's incredible.
But I think what I liked about that, and again, I didn't appreciate it as a kid, but I appreciate it now, is that if you do actually talk to a chess master in real life, of course he'll nerd out about something like that.
Yes.
Right? And the fact that they let you do that, like I said, it's not, of course, it's not efficient, yes. You would, quote unquote, waste space that would have gone to other things. But again, lived world, and the real world has a lot of useless information and little things that nobody cares about, but yet somebody does.
Yes.
Right. And that to me, like, okay, that's what made it special for me. The fact that they did that, and that's what I wish more games would do, because I mean, I do get it that a lot of games, you have to be efficient. You have to make sure everything, gives everyone information that they need. But there's also beauty in inefficiency. The little details here and there is what I appreciated, and Krondor has that in spades. So anyone who's played it, like that, despite the fact that the dungeons are literally just corridors, right?
Yes.
There's nothing, right?
Yes.
The swords, even basic swords and kingdom armor, they took the time to write a paragraph explaining what it is.
Yeah, like the difference between like the Grey Tower armor, which is the dwarven armor, versus like the regular kingdom armor versus like, okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not even going to go into that Guarda Revanche like sword that came out of a shell that was extremely interesting. Like, what the heck?
Right.
It's got more backstory than half of the freaking characters do.
Yeah, like the kingdom sword is just literally just a basic sword, no powers behind it.
None.
And yet they took the time to write a paragraph about the history and the culture around it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, or the mortal lamprey swords are different than the kingdom swords. Like, it's like, okay, that's crazy. I talked about my huge thing. All of those little details and reading those little paragraphs, I'm like, it kind of makes me, the cares of the world of the day that I have outside of this game kind of melt away when I'm reading about, like the lovingly crafted like food, like what's in a ration pack. Oh, it's sweetmeats.
That one.
And it's like, and this is poisoned, and some are not, and some are. It's like, okay, now I know what my characters are eating. Sometimes, a lot of people that even write in a book, it's like you stopped to make camp and you had like some lunch. It's like, well, what did you have for lunch? I mean, this game like literally went into what is in a standard kingdom ration pack, which begs the question, if you're from somewhere else, do you have other things? Like, it's very interesting. So I agree with that. The definite immersion.
It's what makes it special for me is it is just absolutely packed with character and packed with like information that fleshes out the world. Right from the very beginning, you're given a lot of information about the characters, you get information about what the situation is. You don't need to know anything about the setting.
No.
But as you go through it, you can learn as much as you want to learn. You can just beeline straight towards the important things if you know the setting.
Yeah.
But you can also ask people about all kinds of things that flesh out the world.
Absolutely.
You flesh out the other kingdoms that are nearby. You flesh out information about the Rift War.
Yeah.
You flesh out things about magicians and all sorts of like the previous things in the past. And you can completely avoid clicking a lot on the character's portrait in the inventory if you don't do it enough, you will miss the entire backstory of every character in your party.
Yes, I didn't.
You don't have to have that.
You don't, and it's funny because I didn't even realize that you could do that with the right click and bringing up the character description until like halfway through the first time I played. I was like, oh my goodness. So Thrithland, who appears to be a pretty good fan of yours, is saying, good thing that Kiko never approaches games in a straight line, and it's coming across.
I do not know, and some people get to the point it's like, oh, you like, I get it, you're just running around doing this stuff. Can you please stop? And I'm like, no.
It's fun.
I'm sorry, I have to go over here and find a box and open a box with a Mordhell puzzle and then go back all the way over there to get a spell that I can then learn and all this stuff. And books that I can read and barding that I can do. Oh, all the barding.
Yeah, and it cracks me up, and I quote it sometimes. Okay, for example, when Owen is barding and he is barding poorly.
Yeah.
And I just, sometimes when, I'm on Facebook or we're in a gamer group or something and I'm chatting with people and they say something off the wall, I want to be like, out, And I have done that and it just makes me laugh. And I'm sure nobody gets it. It's like the most obscure reference, just saying out. But that's where I'm going with it.
Owen, please learn more than one song.
Yeah, more than My Kingdom Mine.
You could have learned any other song, Owen.
Yeah, that's true. He seems to be kind of a one-hit wonder type guy.
But that one hit, but you get to 100 barding, they'll just throw money at you.
Yes.
Like humans, Mordhell, doesn't matter if you're trying to infiltrate and sneak away. You go to their tavern and you just sing This Kingdom Mine and they'll throw you 300 sovereigns.
It's the only song in all of Midkemia, so people love it because they don't have music otherwise.
Cav 2K there has just reminded me of the April Fool's joke I did for 2022 with the This Kingdom Mine ad.
What'd you do?
For Owen's, Aeon Toll animated one of those spoof-like infomercial adverts for ordering Owen's This Kingdom Mine album.
Oh my god, I've seen that. I've actually seen that, and that was hilarious. I commented on it.
Fantastic animation of that. And that was just, it was playing on like he only has one song.
Owen Belford, live as you've never heard him before, with his newest collection, My Kingdom. 27 tracks of melodious melodies that will leave you spellbound. Now you too can despair thy eyes as you experience the wonderful singing voice of Owen Belford. Owen has played to raucous applause in all the taverns of the Isles, and now he can play in your home. My Kingdom also includes a very special performance with his longtime friend, Jimmy the Hand, on the tin whistle. If you ever own one Owen Belford album, it has to be this one. Grab your phone and order a copy today. To order your copy of Owen Belford, My Kingdom, call 1-800-468-5883. That's 01800-HOT-LOOT. Alternatively, send your gold sovereigns with a registered delivery rider to the address on screen. Offer not available in the Northlands while stocks last. Songs contain no actual magic.
And the music gets me in the nostalgia also. I was showing my husband the other day talking about the event that's coming up, and he didn't grow up with computer games. He was a console player, and so he doesn't have like the Sierra experience that I have. And so he's like, so what is this? And I'm like, just listen. This is listen to the music, And so yeah, it dawned on me how much I love the music when I was showing him track after track of the soundtrack.
Me too. My partner's like, I really like listening to you play that game. I'm like, Betrayal at Krondor? He goes, yeah, because he'll be in other parts of our apartment and he'll be like, that sounds kind of cool. I'm like, yeah, it does. Yeah, I really love certain tracks. It's like when I go to visit like certain cities, I know that it's going to be a city song that I like, and I'm like, I'll do a little dance of this. Every time Romney music comes up, because it starts like really high and then it gets like really weird, I'll be like, I have to do a dance every time I'm in Romney, but that's my thing. But anyway, you feel about like all the text-based game during your gameplay experience? And this is unique to you because you're a content creator, you're a YouTuber. So not only do you have to read it for yourself, but you also have to read it and make that appealing to an audience that's watching you. So how did you feel about that? And how did it set it apart?
I loved it.
Okay.
I love things like that. I love the game giving me a wall of text because I'm like, yes, I get to read this entire wall of text.
Did you do voices?
Oh, yes.
I remember you did.
You know how Jimmy the Hand is meant to be quite young?
Yes.
Not when I voiced him. This was Jimmy the Hand. I don't know why, but this voice kind of stuck for the entire game.
It fit with the model character as far as I'm
Just
concerned.
like, it's like, why? But I loved reading it. I loved reading the prose. The music as well did a great job when it was a cutscene one for setting the scene. But it's just great giving voice to both the what's happening and the characters. I think that game would have lost something with all that text from having voice acting. And I'm glad it didn't have voice acting.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Nowadays, if this game had been made, it wouldn't have had the prose. It would have.
True.
They would have. Well, it would have animated the actual cutscene, which, while great, you would have lost the things that a novel has. It's sort of almost like a halfway house of you get the gameplay of the game, but you also get the prose of a novel in the actual thing, even if it is just. Jimmy has gone into this building, met a woman, and then her husband has punched him in the face.
Yes. That's a real thing that happened.
It's a real thing that happens. Just you don't know which house it's going to be, but then you get punched in the face. Just
the detail that's put into the storylines, the fact that it's a little bit darker, it's more adult. I'm not saying it's inappropriately adult-like or anything like that. Though I do recall one priestess everyone seems to love. Which isn't bad, you guys. It's not a bad thing. It is a little more gritty. It's a little more adult. I love how every interaction is almost a short scene. And it's all through the writing that these encounters happen. You stumble upon this barn and you investigate the barn. The characters grin to themselves and it's all very detailed and it wraps itself up nicely in a bow. It's always enjoyable to just read what's happening when you get text on your screen. And I can't say that for every game. I just feel like it was a fresh take. It was something different. It has a great detailed storyline with phenomenal writing. And I think I'm probably going to have to say that the writing sets it apart more than anything else.
I agree.
It's so well done in the way the dialogue is done, in the way the inventory is explained. Oh, okay, you got to figure it out on your own. And you think about it, it's like that in real life, right? Nobody explains to you what this person's like. You're gonna figure it out maybe from their attitudes and their behaviors. Oh, okay, this person's a jerk, or this person's pretty kind. Just
figure it out.
And I think that's you figure it out on your own. And I think that I like the fact that not a lot of games do that, but Krondor does. And I think that's what I think. Right. The fact that it says a lot, but it doesn't actually say a lot.
Another thing that set the game apart, since we're on the subject, item descriptions. You did not have many items. You had very few items compared to other RPGs that you would drown into all sorts of items. But all the items made sense. They were part of the world. They were part of the lore. You could right-click those, and you would get a description by the one character of the party describing taking the item, looking it around, weighing the blade, maybe stuff like that. It was really, really immersive.
You were letting me know that it helped you with English. Learning all the walls of text was actually something that not only you got enjoyment from, but it helped broaden your vocabulary. It did with me too. There were a couple of words that I learned as a young child. I didn't know what I was reading, and I also learned. So, is that true for you as well?
Definitely. I'm not sure when it was that we started learning English at school, but I was a bit proficient in English, but it was, I guess, mostly from computers and stuff like that. And reading through Betrayal at Krondor's text, yeah, I probably understood 2/3 of it, let's say, maybe more. I mean, I could get the point, but yeah, I still had a dictionary next to me, so it was slow going. But I think that at the end of the game, I was much better
at reading.
Understanding of English. So yeah.
There was one word in particular I remember I didn't know what it was, and it was only used once in the game, and it's nictiate, which is another way of kind of like blinking, and I didn't know what that meant, and it was like Garath's eyes nictiated in the light. In the background, what I have behind me is the game, the little game, your project. Little, it's gonna be huge to me. I've already played the demo, which is out already. It's awesome. Your game is called Call of Sargnar. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, thanks. That's my little baby project. I've been developing it for, I don't know, 20 years in my head, but about 6 in code, and it's still a long ways to go. But it is basically as Neil Halford would say, a Baka-like, which is basically a tribute to Betrayal at Krondor. It grew out of the necessity, basically. I wanted to play another Betrayal at Krondor. There was no other games like it, so I basically, yeah, I wanted to do a spiritual sequel, except since I could not license the universe, I made my own and everything from scratch. It started out as basically a clone of Betrayal at Krondor, inspired very heavily. But since then, yeah, I have developed and expanded those systems, so it's becoming something of its own, basically. You guys have made a masterpiece. You probably know about it. You won enough awards for it, and it's still highly regarded today by so many people, even newer generations. And yeah, of course, what better praise than knowing that it inspired me to create my own.
I would say that the thing that puts it ahead of a lot of others is just execution, because like you think like contemporaries like Ultima would get certain things like really well, but then other aspects like maybe the engine for fighting would be like completely pointless. So I feel like in comparison to all that, you know, I mean, Betrayal brings like this like mostly open world concept to the table. It brings, you know, it brings like full on 3D, like putting it all together and then having it all executed well, so that you're not really like let down by any one aspect, even if the other ones are you know, are like good, whereas a lot of other games they were kind of like lopsided.
Playing a game like this, other than the entertainment value of it, you know, it teaches useful skills, you know, solving riddles, figuring out various things. A lot of the old world adventure games like that, you know, I mean, it teaches great problem solving skills.
I'm really thankful that I got into these sorts of games when I was younger, because games were so much more difficult. So I don't know if I would have had the patience to really discover a lot of the games I used to play if I got into them much later, which is really a shame. And it probably says something about society. It's very well put together. The music is great. When you have a great story and a great music and great writing, like you can't possibly go wrong. And I think that Betrayal at Krondor went super right.
It's everything, basically. Krondor is a cocktail of so many things done right in a package, you know. Very rewarding exploration, you know. Wherever you went to nooks and crannies, you would find those lock chests, you know, world lock chests. Those are something of its own. You had really good combat. You did not have respawning enemies, so what you killed stayed dead.
Like that.
you could explore. Basically, it was an open world game, basically, right? You could go anywhere, nearly anywhere, whenever you want. It was an open world, which was far ahead of what the game did back then. And yeah, the plot. It was not a simple. It was not a simple plot. It was a complex plot. It was a novel in game form, like I said.
Just know that it's very rare to make a game that stands the test of time, like Betrayal at Krondor. Like most games from 30 years ago, nobody remembers. But
True.
Betrayal at Krondor is remembered, and it's remembered for being a classic game. And that is something that absolutely you should take immense pride in. It's a fantastic experience. It's a really good experience. And when a game leaves you at the end with that feeling of, well, now what do I do? That's the sign that something has been good, because you've been invested in it and involved in it. And there's this void now that it's done and that it's gone. And that was what Krondor left me when I finished it, which is a sign of a really good game.
Okay. Sorry, let's try that again. You just missed all of my incredible jokes. I just feel terrible. So I was joking about that before. You think that after all these years, after all of the pandemic, that we would all know better. Would know better to turn the mic back on. Anyway, I just want to, again, I want to thank all of the amazing folks that came in and participated on our panel today. Was just so grateful to have all of my wonderful teammates come back. I hadn't seen several of those folks in years, and so it was fantastic that they were able to come back and join us. I also want to thank our moderator, David Dawson. He had to drop off because today is actually his 30th anniversary for his high school. So I was asking him about the fact that was it a Betrayal at Krondor themed a high school reunion. But anyway, but I wanted to again just thank my fellow devs for coming on and participating in the chats today. I want to thank all of you for hanging out in questions and asking lots of good questions, and for keeping all the love alive for this game after 30 years. And as Kokosia was saying a little bit earlier, we are very fortunate in as much that 30 years on, we're still here talking about this silly game that we made back in 1993. And not everybody gets that privilege. And the fact that there are still folks out there playing it, they're on Twitch, they're streaming it, they're talking about it and stuff. And so you're an incredible fandom. And I've just been very privileged over the years to be able to work and interact with you guys. Damian, I'm a big supporter of Call of Sargnar, so you can probably tell that's, with me, I'm one of his Patreon backers, and I want to see him succeed and everything else, because that's a level of love and dedication that's really hard. You don't see that sort of thing very often. I just thought I'd share something with you. So last night we had the big anniversary party with devs, and I mentioned earlier is we had two people fly in. One fellow came in from Providence, Rhode Island. Another fellow and his girlfriend came in from Las Vegas, and that was amazing. But something that was kind of fun that wasn't took me by surprise is that three people came up to me and gave me gifts, and these gifts were awards that were left behind at Dynamics after I had left. And so I have one of the awards at home, which was the Compute Award, but this sucker is the one that I was really happy to kind of show up. And this was the Game of the Year award from Strategy Plus magazine. And there were two awards that I didn't even remember we'd won. And so I have to add those of you who follow my blog on neilhalford.com. I'll have to add that to the list of awards that Krondor won over the years. But anyway, thank you again. Thank you for showing up and doing stuff. We're going to rebroadcast this on Kilgore's channel probably in a few days. I'm going to try to make myself available to answer more questions as we do the rebroadcast. As always, if you follow me on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, always happy to answer questions or take comments or whatever. Anyway, thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon. If any of you happen to be near Portland that are watching this, Jane and I are actually going to run up and hit Powell's for a little bit, because you know that I'm a book fiend. And so we're going to go hit the world's largest independent bookstore that's up in Portland. So we'll be up there in a couple hours. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care. And until next time, I'm Neil Halford, and Betrayal of Krondor 30. Thanks.